No matter what town you live in, there is one thing that's manufactured in every household in some way, shape, or form: trash and garbage. And really, since the late 1980s, households in nearly every town are making a lot more recyclables as well. We're at the point now where this symbol is as universal as this one, or even this one. In many cases, people that pay more attention to what they recycle are actually producing less trash and garbage. In my town, we've got the pay-as-you-throw program, and so far it's been an economically viable plan. You buy these special bags at the supermarket, which cost more than regular bags. That in turn makes you pay more attention to how much garbage you make. And since recycling is free, you start to pay more attention to how much you recycle, and usually recycle more. More often than not, the end result is a cheaper dump sticker. But that's not to say that it works in every town, because there are still some towns out there that haven't signed on to the plan at all. One such town is Kingston, where the measure was voted down at town meeting earlier in 2017. In turn, residents pay a $180 sticker fee rather than buy the special town bags, which average about $1 per bag. But that doesn't mean that people aren't still strongly encouraged to recycle at the transfer station. As part of its major renovation in 2013 and 14, this area was created to provide ample parking to go with several recycling bins. Even folks just bringing garbage still have to drive by this section to get to the hoppers. Despite having a higher sticker fee than they would if they had gone with pay-as-you-throw, people are recycling. The numbers are in, and so far they're pretty good.
As far as your recyclables go, we average about maybe 3 to 4 tons of cardboard every 2 weeks, about 2 to 3 tons of commingle a week, and newspapers averaging maybe about 4 tons every 2 weeks.
For those unfamiliar with commingle, this is a combination of glass, metal, and plastic. It's an idea that's really taken off since the early 2000s to make it easier for the consumer. Before, everything was separated, like the way I still do in my basement. But commingle is really just one step away from single stream, which more often than not is how it's done if your recycles are picked up curbside. Sure, it's easier than having to sort through all of your paper, plastic, metal, and glass, but it's really not all it's cracked up to be.
Single stream recycling is kind of gaining traction with towns because they think that just because it captures more recycling as a whole compared to source separated or multi-stream recycling, the quality of the material is actually lower because a lot of people kind of get confused and think that they can put things in there that don't belong there, and that becomes contamination along with food and whatever else wasn't maybe washed out of a container or something. And so the biggest problem with that is a lot of loads are getting rejected because the people who deal with the material at the material recycling facilities don't want that material because it messes everything up and it devalues what they're trying to sell.
When those loads get rejected because of either contamination or too many things that just aren't recyclable, the cost gets absorbed by the town, which is eventually reflected in the tax bills of the residents, whether they know it or not.
When I work with the public, sometimes I'll try to explain the significance of recycling and why you should do it, and believe it or not, people will say, oh, I pay too many taxes to have to do this or something along that line of thought. And it just doesn't make any sense to me, because if you don't recycle correctly or at all, your town's going to have to absorb the damage from not recapturing the value of that material, and in the end, everyone pays more.
So while recycling correctly can save the consumer money, recycling itself is a business, and in some cases, a pretty lucrative one. Part of that business chain includes vendors. They're the companies that accept the recyclables from the transfer station and bring them to their sites to go through the sorting process. One place your recycles can go to is a facility like this one here in Weymouth, where behind me you can see a pile of cardboard about twice my height. All of this will eventually get cubed before it gets shipped off to end markets. Now, before we get into what an end market is, let's talk about what this place is. This is Capital Paper Recycling, and they're the vendor for the Kingston Transfer Station. They're a materials recovery facility, also known as a MRF, and they take care of all of Kingston's cardboard, paper, and commingle. Since this place doesn't deal with single stream, the materials have already been sorted for the most part. Cardboard and paper in one section and commingle in the other. What the crews produce on any given day can depend on what is in demand for that day. For instance, on this day, they were running cardboard and paper because they had multiple shipments for paper coming in and they had to meet certain weight requirements. Sometimes it just depends on what the biggest pile is on that day, because if you thought the tonnage leaving Kingston was high, Capital Paper is taking in recyclables from at least 9 different towns.
Well, this facility right now is doing about 1,600 tons a month. So we run 5.5 days a week. So on an average day, we're probably doing about 70 tons a day.
Those tons appear in the form of these bales here, whether it's cardboard or plastics. And these are picked up and delivered to end markets. For cardboard, those end markets could be as close as the nearest paper mill. Or in the case of plastic, it could end up overseas. It really comes down to who's offering the best price. And since these are commodities that are always in demand, the work is steady week in and week out.
We pre-ship for the next week. Typically starts Wednesday to Friday. We look at what's coming in, what historically we've got in. We do our metrics on that to know what do we need for the next week, besides any small anomalies that, a new piece of business that we may bring in.
A place like Capital Paper receives a majority of its materials from towns and municipalities, but the metals recycling market offers individuals a chance to cash in. It might require a little more elbow grease to haul it in, but it turns out that old scrap metal you might have lying around the house may have some value after all. One place you can take it to on the South Shore is Atlantic Metal in Hanson, Massachusetts. And while plastic and glass have low turnover or recapture rates, metal, along with cardboard and paper, is quite the opposite.
Metal, aluminum, paper, cardboard, all of those things, generally, from all of the figures I've seen, have about 70% to 80% of all of that eventually ends up getting recaptured through recycling, which is very good. That's a very high rate. But plastics are more toward the 25 to 35%.
Come to Atlantic Metal on a Saturday and you'll see why those numbers are so high for metal recycles. What they take in here inside the building are non-ferrous metals, which means they do not contain iron, are not magnetic, and are usually more resistant to corrosion. That includes wires, computers, copper, brass, stainless steel, and aluminum, just to name a few. People come in, weigh it out, get paid, and that's when the real work begins for the crew.
So we buy the product from you. Once we buy it from you, we sort it into different categories. So there's, say, 5 different categories of wire. So we buy the wire from you in whatever category it applies. Then we separate it, put it in boxes, and when it's full, the box is full, we weigh it, and then we sell it to whoever's buying. There's several markets right now, so you have the foreign and domestic market mostly. So we'll sell to whoever's offering the best price at that time we sell.
They do deal in ferrous metal, but that stays on the outside. And no matter what people are bringing in, when it's busy here, this weigh station can look like the Southeast Expressway during rush hour. And of course, these metals are a commodity, so from here, they sell to whomever is paying the highest price, whether it's foreign or domestic.
So they come in with a truck, we load their truck, and they take it away. They typically take it to a shredder, which is in Boston, and they shred it, and then they put it on a barge and send it overseas. That's where it goes.
And that's what can be somewhat discouraging for the avid recycler. For those of us who spend time loading our cars and going through the paces of sorting and recycling, it would be nice to know exactly where it goes when all is said and done.
If the aim is to have a positive environmental impact, a good way to achieve that goal is by adhering to the basic principle of reduce, reuse, and recycle. And by that we mean reduce the amount of waste that we produce overall, reuse things like bottles and grocery bags, and of course, once you've exhausted all of your other options, recycle as much as you possibly can. And it's funny because we haven't even gotten around to what to do with our garbage. We'll have to save that for our next segment. For now, reporting from Atlantic Metal in Hanson, Massachusetts, I'm Brian Sullivan for PCN Life.